I hired you because you're the best engineers I was able to find. They tell me you can do anything. You'll be spending millions of dollars, hundreds of millions perhaps. That's why you're an engineer and I'm an executive. That's why you work for me, because when I have to, I can be ruthless with my own mistakes. Gentlemen, I want you to build me a spaceship. What? A spaceship, sir? That's right.
Truth.
Damon Stapleton has taken a massive step of having possibly the best job in New Zealand advertising, which is creative chief of DDB Aotearoa, and has decided instead to step into the dark abyss of starting up a new agency. So in the middle of the Auckland lockdown, I talk now to the incoming Monkeys creative chief about leaving DDB after many years, what you actually do when you're on gardening leave, and whether or not you should have a bath before or after talking to your gynecologist. Oh, and the future of advertising, where technology will take the industry, and whether it's a good job for your kids to do. But then you'll probably only listen to the gynecologist bit.
You're listening to Truth
And Soul,
the New Zealand Advertising Podcast.
Welcome to a special New Zealand Auckland lockdown edition of Truth and Soul podcast, Truth and Soul Incorporated, coming to you from a new studio of Franklin Road, Tawharanui. I don't get into town so much these days, and Jonathan from Franklin Road ordered me to get a decent mic and headphones, which I think I have now. So hopefully you can all hear me clearly. And today on the other side of Auckland is Damon Stapleton. And Damon... g'day. Quick bit of background in case anybody doesn't know you. Damon is currently causing all kinds of problems in the advertising industry because after several years at DDB as were you creative chairman or something like that?
Junior copywriter.
Junior copywriter at DDB New Zealand. He left with the other incorrigible Justin Moday to form the New Zealand version of the Monkeys, which apparently is not actually even called the Monkeys, it's called Accenture Interactive.
Accenture Interactive is part of Accenture, and then there's the Monkeys, and they work together.
Right, okay. So Damon has done this podcast before, and I understand from my people who do this kind of thing, i.e. Jonathan, that Damon was the most listened to of all the podcasts. I think that's because he circulated it around all his mates.
It's because I was first. I had the most time.
No, I circulated it around all his mates in South Africa and paid them to listen to it for no good reason.
You got to do what you got to do.
And so in the hallowed tradition of Fast and Furious 47, this is officially known as Damon Stapleton 2, the remake. Anyway, so Damon, welcome.
Thank you.
And what have you been up to for the last 6 months?
Well, for the last 6 months, 3 of them I was at DDB, and then 3 of them I was on gardening leave. And obviously, we've now opened the Monkeys, and we're getting going. So I think you probably understand what it's like to start an agency, Paul.
Well, I don't actually, because I never started one like yours, which according to somebody's press release, already has 30 people working there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's Accenture Interactive has about 30 people already, and that's made up of all sorts of different people, programmers, designers, UX, that kind of thing. And then obviously we're hiring people as well. So half and half. So
if this podcast goes out, so we're just at the beginning of September. If it goes out reasonably quickly, then deluge Damon and Moday with your CVs if you're looking for a new job. And the other news is, of course, that you immediately have a couple of clients. I understand.
A couple. I didn't know that.
Okay, well, I think you probably do, but maybe you can't talk about one. But the official one is ASB. I think
That's correct.
I think we can say that.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
They decided to work with us, and we're delighted. We're delighted that they've made that decision.
Okay. Very. Yeah.
Well, let me put it this way: it's extremely helpful if you have an agency of over 200 people in Sydney, and
Yeah.
in terms of the pitch, those guys led that pitch.
Yeah. Okay. So when you had your 3 months gardening leave, now as I understand it, with gardening leave, you get paid by the previous agency, but you don't actually do anything. Is that right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's about it. Yeah.
So what did you do during your gardening leave?
I had an incredible amount of things I was gonna do. You know, I was gonna write a book, and I was gonna do all sorts of things, and then I think sort of life gets in the way, and it takes quite a lot of work doing nothing, Paul. I don't know if you've experienced that.
Well, I'm supposed to be doing nothing now, and let me tell you
I mean,
how my day.
look at you.
Let me tell you how my day's been. At 8:30 this morning, I spent an hour on the phone call with a gentleman from New York who's looking into investing into New Zealand. I then went for a bike ride over to Tawharanui for an hour. I came back and talked to my gynecologist, also my old neighbour who is looking to get into the social media field, followed by a bath in the middle of the afternoon, followed by a podcast with your good self.
Do you always bath after you've seen your gynecologist?
I know it should be the other way around, really. But yeah, no, I didn't see him because obviously we're in lockdown. How are you finding lockdown? So you can't eat. So you have a new agency, but you can't even go there.
It's pretty strange. Launching an agency in the middle of COVID is an interesting exercise. But I think in a strange way, because we work with everyone in Australia, Teams is look at what we're doing right now. It has made it a lot easier to talk to people and get stuff done. It does take a bit longer, in terms of doing the work and that, but I do feel like technology's caught up, and it's not perfect, but it's doable. So, we're able to do pitches, we're able to talk to different teams, we're able to do all of that. And, I'm sure every agency's in the same boat at the moment. It doesn't actually even matter if you're established. In lockdown, you're all the same, really.
Yeah, no, that's right. But I guess other agencies at least they've at least met all their staff, which
yeah, I'm meeting mine.
Makes things easier. So tell me, or rather tell us, why did you join the Monkeys? You had a great gig at DDB. How long had you been there?
7 years.
7 years. Oh, okay. I was there 6, so I guess that's a 7-year itch.
I think DDB is a great agency, and it's, I have a lot of love for DDB, and I think it's got so many great things about it in terms of the way it's been built. There's a respect there for creativity, but also a real respect for the clients and how they work with clients. So I'll always be extremely grateful to DDB, and I have a lot of affection for them. I think for me, it was getting to a point where if I'd left DDB and gone to another agency, that would have been I don't know why I would have done that. So for me, it was this idea of technology, data, and creativity. And I suppose it's this idea of, can you make creativity bigger? I think advertising over the last couple of years is, it sees creativity as this part of the solution. But I think the real way forward is to look at creativity and go, well, what else can we do with it? Where else can you take creativity? Can you solve business problems? The best way I can explain it is there are a lot of ideas and agencies that just stay on walls and don't get made. And I think what I'm trying to do is find a place where we can make more of those ideas, and explore those sort of territories.
But there was, like, generally when you have a pitch these days, or when I was doing it, you'd have the direct answers to the client problems, i.e. a campaign across multimedia that they can run for the next 3 years. But then often you would have, as you say, ideas that are into other areas, how they might paint their canteen internally, what uniform their sales staff might wear, or whatever.
Yeah.
But those things are just so throwaway that there can be some great ideas, and the clients just go, "Oh yeah, thanks, that's good," and maybe they do it, maybe they don't, but they don't pay you for it.
Well, that's I think the thing is, a good idea is a good idea, but I suppose the question is, you might argue that advertising agencies, are they taken seriously when they put those ideas out there? Because there are other companies that are putting those ideas out there and are getting paid for it. So the question is advertising going to just keep doing what it's doing, or is it going to start exploring some of these frontiers?
Well, it's not going to keep doing what it's always been doing, because if it does, it will go bust.
And why? So that's interesting. Why do you say that?
Well, ever since I started in the industry back in the 1850s, the revenue has declined. Revenue and profitability has been in decline for everywhere that I've worked. I think I've touched on this before in previous podcasts. When I started at Y&R in London, there were two brand new Ferraris in the car park. And the CEO, John Banks, took clients on Concorde to go and see the Rolling Stones in New York. Now,
a different time.
Yeah, I don't see too much of that going on these days.
So I suppose, I just kind of go, there's a lot of talk, every time you go to Cannes, there's talk about, what's the new way forward, or is there a new model? And, there's a lot of those conversations, and they've been going on for a couple of years. But I suppose Justin and I were like, well, potentially this could be a new model where you can take technology, data, and creativity and start to look at how you can work with those Lego blocks and build different things. And I think if you have all of those things, you can also start to present different types of campaigns and different types of work. So, I suppose on the one hand, you could say this is an experiment, but, you've got people like David Droga that are working at Accenture Interactive now. And I think they realize that there are opportunities as we go forward to build something new.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned David Droga, and he has built an extraordinary career for himself. But clearly, he is way smarter than me, and what he's done in New York. How many people work there now?
I don't know how many people, but I'd say it's probably 500 or 600. I think Droga 5 is a $200 million company, something like that. And obviously, Accenture Interactive is in the billions.
Yeah, extraordinarily successful. What would you put down the success of Droga, particularly in America, is generally seen as a very conservative market? What do you think drove that?
Well, I think if you look at the work they've made over, it's been a long period of time now where, if you look at the stuff they've done for Under Armour or the New York Times, I think they've managed to do creative work on big clients. And I think that's a real challenge in America to do that level of work. And, I think they've done it over a long period of time. For Accenture to buy them, they tend to buy the best independent agencies out there. So, I think David Droga has got an amazing track record over the last 10 or 15 years of work for really big clients.
I mean, you talk about them being great creatively, but were they great in terms of the interactive area as well? Were they using the digital space in a new way?
I think that's something that, if you look at what's happening, maybe say over the last 5 or 6 years, I think the interactive space, for me, it's more about how technology is integrated. And I think that's where you're starting to see some shifts and some changes, where technology is starting to integrate into integrated campaigns. People used to always talk about digital like it was a separate thing. And I think this, especially with some of the stuff that Accenture Interactive is doing now in the experiential space, I think there's some really interesting stuff that's starting to come out. And I think Droga has always been the creative aspect of that. I think the trick is how you start to blend these things.
Yes, I think, talking about interactive, in a sense, is a curious choice of words for Accenture, because that's a very old school. That's what digital used to be called back in the 2000s, and it stopped being used as different nomenclature.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the problem is there's so many things. It's like when you call somebody a creative, that could mean all sorts of things.
Yes.
When you talk about interactive or you talk about digital, it can mean a multitude of things. And I suppose that's the real thing about brands now. A brand is often made up of a multitude of things. And what you're looking for is someone to pull all of those things together. So it's quite hard to be a specialist these days. I think you have to have the mindset of a generalist, because you have to be able to do a whole lot of different things to do integrated campaigns or to do integrated work.
Yes, I think in the old days in the agency, we certainly talked internally about being generalists, and the importance of that, because there were so many areas to go into.
Five years ago, you had a lot of agencies saying they were digital agencies.
Yes,
and you don't see that as much as you used to, because I think things have moved on.
No, the issue with that is that you'd be talking to the client, and the client would be, going, right, well, we need, right, you guys do that, and we'll need to get a digital agency over there. And we go, no, we do that as well. And, excuse me, if you didn't have digital agency in the title of your agency, it was presumed that you didn't do that. And I guess that was, to a certain extent, a lag with clients. That agencies had actually moved on a bit, and it took clients a while to realise that.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose we're just we're at a point now where it's just good communication.
Yeah,
advertising likes to make all these channels, but at the end of the day, a good idea is a good idea, and you put it in a place where people will see it.
Okay. So you say a good idea is a good idea. The way that people consume media is changing almost on a daily basis.
Yep.
And from my point of view, okay, I'm not the average consumer in New Zealand. I don't watch any terrestrial television. Very occasionally, TVNZ on demand. I can say that now. I don't work in advertising anymore. When you work in advertising, you have to say that you watch news at TV1 every single night, even though you were still at work every single night. So in terms of video consumption, I can pick and choose. If something turns up on Facebook, I can watch it or not, and generally not. There was the theory that video advertising, i.e. TV commercials, would have to get better so that people would opt in to watch it. People would actually choose to watch it. And if you didn't make good, entertaining ads, people wouldn't opt in, so they wouldn't get it. I'm I'm not personally, an individual, I'm not seeing much of that or any of that.
So are you saying what, you don't see much advertising, or you don't see any ideas?
I don't. So for example, if I'm watching YouTube, then ads will come on that, but they're generally lowest common denominator.
Yeah, I agree. I think the simple answer to that is you have to make things that don't interrupt what people are doing. You have to make things that people want to be part of, and that actually sets the bench much higher. I think there's a lot of digital advertising that often looks like 1950s advertising, where there's a pack shot and a headline, and just because it's on a digital channel, somehow that makes it digital. I think you have to think a lot harder about the kinds of stuff you're going to make if people can ignore you. So I think I think there's a lot of rubbish that's out there. I don't dispute that.
You can't blame me for that anymore.
Well, I mean,
in the past.
Any bad ad I've ever made, I always said it was made by you. But I think that it's a real question for people that make advertising. I was reading a thing the other day about film and how the idea of a 2-hour movie could become redundant, because if you look at where money's going, a TV series is a much more lucrative thing for people to invest in. And is there going to be this death of cinema? It's kind of an interesting question about advertising, where there's all these structures and formulas that people sort of subscribe to. Is that going to be what it will look like in the future? And I would say that some of it might exist, but I would say there's going to be a fair amount of change.
Just talking about TV, I presume you watched The White Lotus.
I haven't watched it yet. No, I was launching an agency. Sorry.
Oh, jeepers! You need to stay in touch with
popular culture.
With popular culture and what your audience are doing, and where you can be found. In particular, because White Lotus is about you and your dad.
Oh, is it? All right. I'll check it out.
It's about a hotel owner.
Oh, really? Okay. I'll have a look.
Oh, no, a hotel manager. And
cool.
It's just like your dad. Have a look at it. So I remember in the past, and I'm guessing this would be about 2005, looking at interactive awards, digital, cyber at Cannes. You would have things. I remember a campaign from Perrier where you walked into a room and you were given, and it was done on video, and you were given options. Do you go through this door? Do you go through that door? You go through this one. That happens. You go through that one. So they were building a world, a digital world that you could explore and have fun and spend some time in. And I thought that is an interesting way for the digital world to go. Wow, won't it be great when that kind of stuff happens? But it hasn't. I think that that area would be very useful to explore online.
I think the thing is about online and digital. It's funny, like what these words mean. I think digital is always seen as separate from reality, but I think if you look at things today, digital is reality, and there's much more of a blend. So if you've got augmented reality and you go to Trafalgar Square, you could have a different experience of Trafalgar Square because of what's on your phone. So now all of a sudden you have these things blending and working together. So I think when we first started seeing some of these ideas, it was kind of seen as a separate way of operating. But I think now these things are much more blended, and you see that all the time. If you go to the New Zealand lounge, and it asks you if you want coffee.
Yeah.
On your phone, I mean,
Yeah.
that's a very simple explanation of how digital and reality work together. So I think things have moved on considerably, but maybe they're not as maybe sometimes they're not as sexy, but that doesn't mean they're not valuable to brands.
I mean, you mentioned augmented reality. I remember that the first augmented reality ad in New Zealand would have come out in maybe 2004, 2005.
Yeah,
I remember people coming into when we started up Barnes Catman, people coming into the agency demonstrating, and that was 2008, demonstrating augmented reality, and us thinking, wow, this could be really interesting. And to be honest, not very much has been done with it.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think uh, I think you're talking about advertising. I think there's a fair amount that's been done beyond advertising.
No,
I
I wasn't
mean,
talking about advertising. I was talking generally.
just generally.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess my response would be there's all these different tools. I think there's a lot that's been done in the digital space. I think we could agree on that. I mean, I think what it's doing is it's maybe redefining experience more than advertising. And I think if I look at what Accenture Interactive is about, is it's about looking at experiences, and that for me is kind of a pathway to where I think a lot of advertising might go in the future.
Yeah, I mean, my thought was it should be there already, and that advertise. Every year at Cannes say in cyber Cannes, new technology comes up that people get hugely excited about, and that's the way of the future, and it just dissipates. And
Yeah, I think a lot of technology will die, and it'll die every year because it's not useful. But I mean, if you look at what an iPhone could do in 2005 and what an iPhone can do now, we've been living with that, so we don't really pay that much attention. But it's a fairly dramatic shift in terms of some of the things it's capable of doing. But I think if you look at a lot of these, there's a lot of, it's like Silicon Valley, right? There's a lot of ideas that come out of Silicon Valley that are crazy, and they go nowhere. But then there's going to be a couple that are brilliant. And I think technology has to interact with human beings, and human beings at the end of the day will always decide if it's useful or if they can use it or if they need it. And I think that'll always be the barometer. And I also feel like some of these things, they go away and then they come back.
Yeah.
When the time is right. It's like it's interesting in lockdown, right? Everybody's in the States has been watching Friends, which is an old sitcom.
Yeah.
But because there's 19 years worth of Friends, people have been watching that. So then it's become a hit again. It's because the right time and the right circumstances happened for that to occur. So you might find with virtual reality or augmented reality, it's not right yet, but doesn't mean it won't come back or it won't be used for something in the future. But I think the thing with technology is it's not going to go away.
No.
Let it keep coming.
No, absolutely. I don't think it's going to go away, and it is scary in the field of robotics. What militarily, what will shortly be able to be produced. What military drones do now is absolutely terrifying. And
and I mean, you look at different things in your house talking to each other, or your car be able to talk to your fridge, or these are all things that are happening right now and will keep happening. So what that says is, the way that you communicate, the way that decisions are made for you. In the future, will your shopping list be done by Alexa? I don't know, I'm just making this up. Where that'll decide what kind of toilet paper you're going to order. Versus you going and buying it in a store. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just saying that there's a lot of implications for how people make decisions or decisions are made in the future. And I think that'll have a major impact on advertising.
Yeah, well, it's had a major impact on advertising, but I don't see that advertising currently uses it particularly well. I dare say you go, well, that's what we're going to do differently from Accenture. As you say, the way that people decide for themselves what is useful in terms of advances in digital technology and what isn't.
But I think it goes back to your original point, Paul, which is, you're not seeing much advertising. So the real question is, how will advertising reach these people in the future? And I think that is a bigger question for, if you're going to want to talk to these people, how will you do it, and what channels will you use? And I think that's where technology does become relevant for advertising.
Yeah, it was curious. I found myself victim to something. I took up golf for about 2 months, and decided that this was a suitable hobby, and I was told I had to download this golf app. There's an amazing golf app that has all the courses in the world at your fingertips, and you just press a button and it comes up, and you can see how many shots and where you are, and you put your local courses in it and all that kind of stuff. And it's great. It's a great app, but it's sponsored by Tag Heuer.
Yeah,
and not that they have anything particular to golf, but it has a button and says, have a look at Tag Heuer watches. And I found myself going down that rabbit hole going, I wonder what, and you have a look at them and you go, well, that's a pretty good sponsorship. If every single person in the world who's into golf downloads this app and it has Tag Heuer watches on it, must have cost a fortune, but that, in terms of their global budget, you think that is probably quite a reasonable way of going about things.
Yeah, and you'd say, does it, if you 10 years ago or 15 years ago said to Tag Heuer, we think that you need to invest in a digital app that's a golf game, they might look at you like you're crazy. But now it makes a lot of sense, because you're not interrupting what people are interested in, you're being what people are interested in. And I think that is a major shift. For if you look at, I don't know, what's a Gordon Ramsay cooking show? Isn't that an advert too? I don't know. But what I'm getting at is what we call an ad or advertising these days can be many, many things, and I think that is something you're going to see more and more of as we move forward.
Yeah, but I think twas ever thus. There were sponsorship and literal soap operas back in the day, and Popeye was created by the Spinach Corporation of New Jersey, and that
I'm not saying that I'm not saying this has never happened, but what I am saying is that you said yourself you don't watch TV.
No.
But corporate companies still want to reach you, so
they have to.
Yeah, but they have to think about how they're going to do that, and I think just interruption that's one strategy, but I think you have to have others.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's one of the great things about. I mean, I remember going to Cannes, and I think it was in 1994. They said Cannes had its second category. It started off with, I think, film, and then they introduced print. And you look at the proliferation of different things and channels that you have now. It's there's a lot to do. And there's a lot of places to do it. And I think it's becoming more and more important, sort of what you don't do, because there really isn't enough money to cover every single channel. So that becomes very important, the decisions you make, I think.
The whole field has just got so much harder now than it was in the old days when you could just put a television ad and that was it. You talk to half of the world, and I don't envy you on your setting out. It was bad enough when we launched 8 years ago, and here you are launching into the middle of a pandemic, and with the world being turned upside down. So, what do you think?
I think I was going to say the worst thing that will happen is I'll learn new stuff. So it's stressful, but I'll learn things, and that's kind of cool.
Where do you see the rest of the industry going in New Zealand? I mean, globally too. We've seen the almost collapse of the WPP agencies. Certainly, the renaming. Y&R is all but gone. JWT is gone. Ogilvy is a shadow of its former self. There's been some huge changes over the last few years.
It's a difficult question to answer. I mean, the one thing is I'd say advertising. People have predicted the demise of advertising and advertising agencies ever since I started in advertising. So I think we're a pretty hardy bunch, but I do think maybe the question is how will advertising happen in the future? So, for the last 50 or 60 years, you've had these big holding companies, and there's been a structure, but it feels like there are more players, and there are different types of players. You have in-house agencies. You've got your Googles, your Facebooks. So the landscape, I think, is shifting. I mean, I don't think anyone knows where it's shifting to, but I think it's quite tricky because I think you have to be extremely nimble. Or you have to be extremely something. Maybe that's the best way I could explain it. You have to be very creative, very smart, or very nimble. But I would say if you're average, you're going to probably have some problems.
What you mean? There's trouble for the mediocre.
I think. I mean, I don't want to big up your column in the Herald.
Every Sunday in the business section. Yeah.
Yeah. It's your show. You can punt it.
Yeah.
But I do think there are a lot of alternatives and a lot of options, and what that will create is competition, and in the end the fittest will survive, and whatever the fittest is, or what that means, I guess, is open to interpretation. But I think for about 10 years there, you had a lot of big companies that sort of just bumbled along, but I don't know if you can do that anymore.
No, it'll be interesting to see. Now, on a slightly different topic, the book you were going to write, Damon, what's that going to be all about?
Well, I think I'll be talking to you writing this book in the next 10 years. It's a book that I've put together based on my blogs. I've been writing my blog for about 10 years.
Yeah.
And I suppose it's about, it's sort of a survival guide to advertising, little lessons that I've learned along the way. And I mean, I'm the first to admit that it's a vanity project, and I'll probably sell about 3 copies. But it's just one of those things I've always wanted to try and do. So I'm trying to get it done.
Yeah. Have you got an agent / publisher?
I have an agent / publisher, but they're probably not that happy with me at the moment because I'm not maybe meeting all the deadlines I should.
Yeah. Okay. Bloody creatives. So, so your kids, would you say to them, "Hey guys, advertising, there's a great future for you. Jump in." Is that something they'd be interested in or not?
I think they're interested in creativity. I guess the question is, people get sort of down on advertising. I don't really get down on it. I think advertising will survive. I just think it's changing and getting you might even argue advertising is getting bigger, not smaller. So I think there was a sort of an advertising industry, and it was quite defined. And I think advertising has become far less defined in the last 5-10 years. But that's only because I think it's growing, and you find it, in all sorts of places and spaces. Apple has its own advertising agency. Airbnb has its own advertising agency. You look at the BBC, or I think it's at Channel 4. They have in-house creatives that make their advertising. You look at gaming. There's all sorts of things going on. So I don't think advertising will go away. I just think maybe its structure and its form is changing.
Yeah, it's more so spread out and less defined, like a blancmange. Is that the?
Yeah, and I think that creates uncertainty for people because you had Madison Avenue, and you sort of knew what advertising was, and maybe there's a bit of turmoil at the moment, but I don't think advertising will go away. I think it's not like it's going to just suddenly stop. So. I feel pretty bullish about advertising. I just think maybe things are changing a bit.
No, I mean, people, as long as people go on making products that they wish to sell, finding a way to sell those things will be will be uppermost in their mind. If you talk to small businesses, then for 50% of them, the most important thing that they have to do is to get more customers. And
as long as you have to grow, you can't cut your way to growth. So as long as you have to grow, I think there will be a place for advertising.
Yeah. I mean that's, but it isn't necessarily advertising. There are ways of growing your business. I mean, you have to market it. Yeah, the line between advertising and marketing is blurred as well. Or it's two sides of the same coin. Anyway, Damon, thank you so much for coming in to your own house and sitting by and sitting by a computer and sharing stuff. Do you have any creatives there that you've hired recently that you can talk about?
I've hired some creatives, but I can't tell you their names yet. But I will pretty soon. But I've hired about 6 or 7 creatives. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, good luck with them and good luck with everything. I kind of feel you don't need luck too much at the moment. You guys seem to be on a initial roll, but
I'll take all the luck I can get, man.
Okay, luck's coming your way. Thanks for chatting. Say hi to Justin, and good on you. Cheers.
Thanks, Paul. Cheers.
And so